Did I spell my team name right? I think I did everywhere. Well, hi everyone. This is my first attempt at making a YouTube video ever. I actually was thinking about doing it in the previous season in this league, but I didn't have a mic. I didn't know how to do anything. My attempt sounded terrible, but we're here for Prismatic Draft League Season 4, and I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try to make a little bit of content here as I go through this season, which I think will be a fun one. So you can see here the roster format. I'm going to explain that quickly, give a bit of background on what the situation is for this draft league, and then I will go through my thought process going into the draft, and then go through the team that I drafted. So, like in most draft leagues, the Pokemon are sorted into tiers. I should say, first of all, this is a VGC Regulation D draft league. Regulation D was the current format when this season started. It still is right now, and there's no special gimmick or anything. It's only Regulation D Pokemon allowed. As in most draft leagues, the Pokemon are sorted into tiers. I'm not going to try to show the draft board because, honestly, it pulls a lot of images from Showdown, and my computer really can't handle that very well. I've done 3 drafts in this league now, and I've had to run every one of them from my phone. So I'm not going to show you the full range of Pokemon that are in what tiers in the draft, but I will show, as we go through this and fill this out, what I drafted where, round by round. You can see here it says S plus or S, and then it says A or B. This is something that was not obvious to me when I first joined this league, but there are 2 legal combinations here. I can take a Pokemon from the S plus tier and a Pokemon from the B tier in these 2 slots, or I can take an S and I can take an A. Those are the 2 legal combinations, S plus and B, or S and A. And you can see there's only one spot for S plus / S Pokemon, so if I take an S tier, then anything in S plus, the very highest tier, I cannot have at all. Potentially a free A tier Pokemon, at least one B, a couple of C's, a D. UT stands for untiered. It's the lowest tier. It's where all the junk mons go, basically. The Pokemon that are hard to find any use for, but everyone in this league has at least one, which is kind of a fun gimmick that they do here. Also, one guy got Berserker in untiered because I think they just forgot to figure out a proper tier for it until after the draft started, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to play that guy at some point in the season, so good for him noticing something that I hadn't noticed. These 4 slots down here are for, they're called the free agent slots. So typically in a draft league, you have some sort of ability. There might be a limited number or something, but you have some ability to swap out Pokemon that you've drafted for Pokemon that have not been drafted and are free agents. They're available for anyone to pick up. In this league, you cannot do that with these slots. You can only do that with Pokemon in these slots. These are the only ones that I'll be able to swap out for free agent Pokemon as the season goes on. They also are the ones that cost points to draft, but I'll get to that in a second. These guys I can trade with other coaches if I want, but I can't just freely swap them out. The points budget to fill the free agent slots is 130, and you can see I've put the prices over here on the side. An A tier Pokemon costs 40 points, B 35, C 30, D 25, untiered 20, S plus or S cannot buy. So like I said, you only get one Pokemon from one of those top 2 tiers, no matter what. 130 points total. So let's talk about my background in draft and sort of what my mindset was coming into this Halifax Masquerainmen PDL Season 4 draft. So I don't have a huge amount of draft league experience, but I used to play singles draft leagues in like Gen 7 in 2019. The Discord leagues that I found were not great. They tended to get canceled partway through due to player inactivity, but I still had a lot of fun, and it was something that I wanted to do more of, but kind of fell off my radar for a while. I didn't get into VGC until 2020. It has been my most enduring pandemic hobby. This year I even started going to actual VGC tournaments, And if I make more continue to make more videos after this one, I probably will talk about that as well. But my only doubles draft league experience at all, and that includes my only VGC style draft league experience, is this league right here, the Prismatic Draft League. This is season 4, but I joined in season 2. This is my 3rd season in the league, and season 2 started earlier this year, like in January. I was doing the draft for that. So I've only been doing VGC draft leagues for a few months, and I only have completed 2 seasons so far. Season 2 in the PDL, my team was a little weird. I didn't really plan it. I kind of just winged it as I went through the draft. But I built something interesting around Armor Rouge and Male Indeedee for support. It wasn't the greatest team ever. There were some inefficiencies in the draft, but I had a core that had some pop to it. It could do a variety of things that opponents had to worry about. So Armor Rouge and Indeedee could do trick room stuff. They could do weak armor, weakness policy stuff. I had a couple of different fighting type attackers in Flamigo and Hariyama that were suitable for different modes for the team and were good physical complements to special attacking Armor Rouge. I had Mousehold for support. I had just like some solid Mons and C tier like Haunch Crow and Quillfish. And I got that team to the semifinals before going down there. Season 3 was a little different. They allowed every team to have one restricted Pokemon at a significant cost to the points budget, with some restricted Pokemon costing more points than others. But every team was forced to some extent to min-max. So I drafted Koraidon, which is one of the most expensive restricted Pokemon, and I had 3 different untiered Pokemon at the low end of my roster. And I ended up sort of specializing my team and building a fairly straightforward, fast Sun offense team, which ended up becoming kind of linear in how I built it week by week and how I played it. And in a way, it was easy, I guess, because I always knew what I was going to do in prep, but the results were very up and down, and I ended up going 500 and missing the playoffs. So coming into this draft, first of all, I wasn't originally going to play this season, but I wasn't feeling very good about how the previous one ended, so I decided to give it another go, and I decided I wanted a different style of team, not like that specialized Sun offense that I used last time. I wanted a team that was going to force me to think week by week, and that could get good results if I used it creatively, but would incentivize me to be creative in how I used it. Approaching the first round of the draft, there was one specific Pokemon that I had in mind, and it suited the way that I wanted to play. It is a Pokemon that requires me to think, but I also wanted to use it for other reasons. It's a Pokemon that, first of all, is just very cool and almost unique. And that has a really interesting mechanic that's fun to play around with. It makes for good mind games. It's something that I've been trying a little bit in VGC already lately, and I wanted to keep experimenting with that Pokemon and push it further. And that Pokemon was Hisuian Zoroark. Now, I had the 12th overall pick out of 18 coaches. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, the very strongest things are going to be taken in the first few picks. And I might as well get Hisuian Zoroark from the A tier in round 1. Why not? But everyone has their own unique draft plan. Everyone has their own particular way of thinking about the draft. And somehow, when the 12th pick came up, Rapid Strike Urshifu, of all things, was still available. My best guess, I don't know, I haven't asked any of the other coaches, but my best guess is because it was in the S+ tier. And there's a real opportunity cost to drafting an S+ tier Pokemon. When I looked over the draft board, which again I'm not going to try to show, I thought there was a real drop in power between A and B. So having an extra A versus having an extra B could make a real difference. And I wasn't sure at this point that I wanted an S+ Pokemon. But for whatever reason, Rapid Strike Urshifu was still there. And I thought about it for a while. And I thought, I even could probably draft it with Hisuian Zoroark, right? Like, Hisuian Zoroark would probably still be there when the second round of the draft came around, and it was a Pokemon that could complement Rapid Strike Urshifu, because it's a special attacker or a support Pokemon. It's faster than Rapid Strike Urshifu. It can disguise itself as Urshifu. I figured I could do some interesting things with those two, and maybe I should take Urshifu now, and I should try to get Zoroark later. But in the end, I decided I didn't want to gamble like that. I wanted my guy. I knew what guy I wanted. I was going to take that guy, and I was going to figure the rest out later. So in round 1, I took Hisuian Zoroark in a free agent slot for 40 points. 40 points. The reason I took it in a free agent slot is that if I want to draft an S plus tier Pokemon, I don't get a free A tier slot. And at this point, I hadn't decided whether I wanted to draft an S plus. So, if I took Hisuian Zoroark as a free A, then I was locking myself out of S plus, so I took it as a free agent. Pretty straightforward. Round 2 came around, and Rapid Strike Urshifu by this point had been taken, but Single Strike Urshifu was still there. And Urshifu is just so strong, it's just such a menace. It's a little bit in the straightforward offense vein, but you can do some stuff with it, I think. It has a variety of sets, at least. It's just so powerful that I thought I should probably not let it go by. Plus, again, Single Strike Urshifu can complement Hisuian Zoroark fairly well, I think. Hisuian Zoroark is potentially worried about... Well, it's almost certainly worried about facing Dark types. That's like its one weakness, right? His Single Strike Urshifu covers Dark types pretty nicely. Hisuian Zoroark can mess with threats to Single Strike Urshifu and open doors for Urshifu to sweep later. So, I mean, I think there's no suspense at this point. I took Single Strike Urshifu as an S plus tier Pokemon in round... Oh, this is one take for you, folks. In round 2. And that meant that I was getting a B tier Pokemon here, no free A. Round 3, it's possible I got bamboozled a little bit, because there was some discussion on the Discord before I made this pick about whether this Pokemon was any good, whether it had any place being in the A tier. But I ended up going with Noivern as my one other A tier pick. And the reason is, once I had Single Strike Urshifu, I was pretty sure I wanted Tailwind. Tailwind is kind of nice for Hisuian Zoroark as well, because Hisuian Zoroark is fast, but it's not like outrageously fast. And I do want it to be moving before things. So between these two guys, I was pretty sure Tailwind was going to be important. Plus, it's a Regulation D draft. A lot of people are going to have Tailwind. So Noivern is one of the fastest Tailwind setters. It's obviously got nothing on Tornadus Incarnate, but only one person has Tornadus Incarnate. And it, after my first couple picks, it definitely couldn't be me. Noivern, I think, is a pretty solid option for getting Tailwind up quickly. When Tornadus is not available. It's also a dragon type, so it has all of the benefits of that typing in terms of offensive coverage, in terms of resistances. Excuse me. It doesn't hit especially hard, but it gets some good attacks, and notably, it gets Boom Burst. And I could, potentially, if the matchup is right, run Terra Normal Boom Burst Noivern, or Throat Spray Noivern, or something, next to Ghost type Zoroark. I could maybe even have them spam Boom Burst and Hyper Voice together, if the matchup is right. So Noivern is a little bit of an iffy Pokemon, and maybe I was biased in part because it's a Pokemon that I like a lot. I really like its design. But that's what I decided to go with here. It gives me the support that I wanted. We'll see how it goes. Round 4. Something unprecedented had happened for this league. In my first 2 seasons in this league, as soon as someone drafted Dondozo, someone else took Tatsugiri within 1 round, and the Dozo-Giri combination never got off. This season, admittedly, Dondozo is not as strong in Regulation D, so I guess it's understandable, but that didn't happen. In fact, the person who drafted Dondozo waited a whole extra round and still got Tatsugiri. They took, like, Glamora or something in between. So now Dozo-Giri was on the board, and everyone was making sure they had their counter. Like, Vaporeon went around this point, and I assume that's why. And I had my eye on a Mon that I think is very good value in the C tier. It's Pokemon that I had in Season 2. It's now the only Pokemon that I've drafted more than once in the PDL. It was in my draft plan for about half of the Season 3 draft before I shuffled things around midway through. And now I'm reunited with my buddy, Quillfish. Quillfish gets Intimidate. Its stats don't, like, hugely pop, but it's got, like, some bulk and some power. It gets Intimidate. It gets Swift Swim. I brought Swift Swim with Manual Rain Dance once or twice in Season 2 as an answer to opposing weather modes. It can do Poison-type stuff, like Toxic and Toxic Spikes. It's got some decent attacking options. I would throw on, like, Icy Wind or Fell Stinger to a Choice Band or Assault Vest set back in Season 2. I even brought Poison Point to one of my matches in Season 2, I'm pretty sure. And Quillfish gets Haze, I think. I think I had the idea when I saw it on a list of Pokemon that get Haze. I hope I don't turn out to be wrong about that. But between Intimidate, Water typing, hopefully Haze, it looks like a pretty reasonable answer to Dondozo. At least maybe not a hard counter, but a pretty strong answer to a lot of Dondozo sets. And also, it's also just, I think, a good value mon in C tier. I was really happy to have it in Season 2, and I'm happy to have it back now. It can be a decent sort of utility matchup filler. Round 5, there was something else that I wanted with the Quillfish spot before I tunnel visioned onto Quillfish. I deferred this pick by 1 round because I thought even if it were sniped, I could replace it somewhat easily. At this point, I was thinking that I was going to make a Trick Room mode, because I like the idea of pairing Zoroark with a bulky Trick Room support Pokemon on a team that can go fast or can go slow. That's what I've done when I've experimented with Hisui and Zoroark in VGC, and that option of going fast or slow was one of the great strengths of my team, I think, in Season 2. So I would have liked to get Cresselia, which is something I didn't mention before. I would have taken Cresselia instead of Urshifu, I think, if it were available, but I think it had already been taken by this point. So I was looking at other bulky psychic types that could set Trick Room and support the team, and there actually were quite a few of them available in the B tier. I was interested in Galarian Slowbro. I was interested in Galarian Slowking. I was interested in regular Slowking. But the guy that most captured my attention, the one that I wanted most and that I was quietly hoping would still be there this round, even if I would be okay with getting one of the others, was Yuxi. So here it is, Cresselia at home. Another bulky psychic with Levitate. And it has a lot of interesting support options. It gets screens, I think it gets Yawn, it gets Trick Room, it gets Imprison to shut down opposing Trick Room, Memento if I really want to use that at some point, and it gets Mystical Power, which can boost its special attacks. So I can run a bulky set and hopefully still get some offense out of it, with the right game plan and the right matchup. Yuxi can do a lot. It's not like a great powerhouse, but I think for Cresselia at home, it's a really solid option. And it's a cool thing to disguise Zoroark as. Which is very much something what I was thinking about in this draft. What do I want to bluff with Zoroark? Urshifu is interesting. Yuxi is interesting. Let's see what else we can come up with, right? So round 6, I was thinking about Steel types for a couple of reasons. One, just one reason at this point, which was that Single Strike Urshifu being my strongest Pokemon, I have to take opposing Fairy types very seriously. Last season when I had Koraidon, people were running like Terra Fairy everything into me, and I could counter that sometimes with Terra Steel, but you don't want to hard commit your Terra. I don't want to have to Terrastallize Urshifu in every matchup. I need other answers to Fairies. That's another good reason to have a Poison type in Quillfish, but I think with something like this, I need multiple answers to Fairies, and I need to address them in different ways. So having a Poison type, I still felt like I wanted to have a Steel type as well, and then maybe even something else beyond that. So I was looking over the options for Steel types, and at the same time I was looking at Trick Room attackers, because at this point I thought I was going to have a Trick Room mode. And I was kind of interested in Copperaja in the C tier, but only really just because it ticked the boxes that I'd laid out there. Copperaja is not that interesting a Pokemon. It really only does so much. I think it might have been okay here, but I wasn't, it didn't grip me. I wasn't wowed by it. And so I looked a little higher into the B tier, and there was a Steel type there. It's kind of a weird Pokemon that's had a decent amount of success in VGC, but that I've actually never tried using myself. And so I don't know how I'm going to do with it. I don't know how I'm going to feel about this pick when the season is over. But I went with Orthworm. And honestly, the main reason I drafted Orthworm is just to have a Steel type to throw at Fairies. It also gives my team a nice boost to its physical bulk, potentially. I could run like Iron Defense on it even. Maybe an Iron Defense Body Press set. Pair that with, special bulky Yuxi, and I have the beginning of a bulky core, right? Intimidate on Quillfish. Plus I have fast offense, Zoroark, Noivern, Urshifu. It also can do Shed Tail stuff, and if I want to play mind games with this team, then I think that's a good tool to have, but I really haven't thought that much yet about how I'm going to use it. I definitely think there are use cases for Shed Tail with stuff like Urshifu, firing off strong attacks, with Yuxi potentially trying to set up or something. There definitely are things I can do with Shed Tail. I don't have to worry right now about leaking what I'm going to do with it, because I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with it. It's just kind of I just kind of took a decent steel type, and then having that tool is a nice boost that I hope to figure something out with later in the season. And now I had bulk on the brain as I went into round 7. And I was looking at the, from here, I can only take C tier Pokemon or lower, right? I can't afford an A or B tier Pokemon because I won't have enough points to fill this last slot, and that would make it an illegal pick. So C is as high as I can go from this point on. And I was looking over the C tier Pokemon, and I thought, maybe I should get a Fairy type. I have Steel, I have Dragon. A Fairy type could, round out my team pretty nicely. I looked for a while at Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff, I talk about whether a Pokemon really grifts me, whether it wows me, whether it looks like good value. Wigglytuff is like right on the line. I thought a bunch about Wigglytuff in the Season 3 draft, and I thought a bunch about it in this draft. And it just doesn't quite convince me, but I could see myself drafting it someday. So, it has strong Hyper Voice, strong Dazzling Gleam, strong and ish. It gets competitive, which is a really nice ability in this format. But the rest of the package just isn't there. The stats, but the move pool's nice. It's a weird Pokemon to think about in a draft. And I was close to taking Wigglytuff here. But I kept it pink, I kept it round, I went in a different direction. I drafted Blissey in a free agent slot. And I don't know how I feel about this pick. Because, on paper, Blissey definitely brings something to my team, right? Blissey has gotten by in competitive Pokemon for a long time, mainly singles, by just invalidating a lot of special attackers. That's largely what it does. And it has nice support moves. It has stuff like Life Dew and Heal Pulse. It has, Icy Wind. It has Healer or Heal Bell, Aromatherapy. I don't know its move pool off the top of my head, but I know it has support stuff, and I know I can just kind of throw it at special attackers. And I think at this point I was looking over the teams that I'm going to face in the regular season, and I was concerned about how I was going to beat some of their special attackers, which was one reason to shore that up. Plus I have Quillfish and Orthworm giving my team some physical bulk. I have Yuxi giving me all-around bulk. At this point I can play a pretty bulky mode, right? And I'm not locked into playing offense. I also had been looking at a lot of potential Trick Room attackers. I'd looked at Avalugg, I'd looked at Camerupt, I'd looked at Colossal. And that's high on the list. I'd looked at a lot of stuff further down, and I just wasn't that impressed. And I felt like Blissey had more potential to do something. That said, I'm not entirely sold on Blissey. It might be a bad Pokemon. I don't really know how it's going to turn out, and that's why I took it as a free agent. It's possible that I pivot away from this direction later in the season, but it seemed to make sense to me at the time. So, that brings us to round 8. And what did I do in round 8? Right, so in round 8, I kind of was at a crossroads with this team. I drafted a lot of bulk in the last few rounds, and I'm going to tell you, I made my D tier pick this round, and I don't have a good track record with D tier picks. I've drafted some bad ones in the earlier seasons. There are just not a lot of good Pokemon there. I thought about taking Knuckle Stack here and making the other coaches hate me, because I had a team that could potentially sit on the field for a long while if that was the mode I wanted to use. And so I thought taking advantage of Salt Cure might be a good win condition in some matchups, and something that opponents have to take seriously, while at the same time I'm also preparing some offense. But then there's the at the same time preparing the offense part. And after drafting bulk in the last few rounds, I wasn't sure that my team had as much offensive firepower as I wanted. A lot of it was kind of just on Urshifu at this point. Noivern's not that strong. Zoroark is okay, but it's not that strong either. I felt like I needed some offensive firepower. I needed something that could just hit stuff hard, that could just give the team some punch. And for that reason, I drafted Flareon. Flareon has base 130 attack. It has guts. Obviously, I could probably run a Flame Orb with some Terra type. I assume that works, but I can't. I could throw a Toxic Orb on it, is what I'm getting at. I could do Trailblaze stuff, quick attack stuff, just throw off fire attacks. It seems like a Pokemon that can give me a little bit of offensive punch where I'm otherwise missing it. At least I hope so. I mean, maybe it's in D tier for a good reason. But that was the thinking. that was why I drafted Flareon. It also gets combined and has like reasonable special stats. I don't even have to go physical guts mode with it. It also gets like Will-O-Wisp. There's a lot that Flareon can do. And I'm sure I'll try a few different sets as the season goes on, if I bring it much at all, which I haven't done with my D-tier Pokemon in the past. That said, even after Flareon, I was still not that convinced that I had the offensive firepower that I needed. I didn't feel like my D-tier Pokemon was the best way to shore up something that I was largely relying on Urshifu to carry at this point, and so I thought that I should continue to look for not just offense in the next round, but something that could set up and be a giant threat quickly. Something that an opponent had to very seriously worry about, especially if I got it behind a substitute or something. And so I was looking at like Ice Cube for Belly Drum, Zangoose for Belly Drum, and a crazy special move, very physical move pool, and Toxic Boost. I was looking at Shell Smash Poltegeist. And then I kind of drank the Venomoth Kool-Aid. So Venomoth can set up with Quiver Dance. It also gets like a ton of support options in Sleep Powder, Rage Powder, Toxic. I think it gets Toxic Spikes. It's another poison type, so my Fairy matchup is yet a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, Quiver Dance was what got my attention, and then the crazy support options are what kept me here. I assume the reason Venomoth is what got me all the way there. I assume the reason Venomoth is all the way down in C tier is that it doesn't really have the stats to be good. So the whole package doesn't quite come together. It might turn out to be less than the sum of its parts, but it has a lot of really interesting parts, and I'm willing to give it a go. I probably would have taken it as a free agent if I could afford to at this point, but I couldn't, so Venomoth is locked onto my team for the entire season, unless I trade it to another coach. Hopefully it'll do pretty well for me. 2 picks left, and they both have to be untiered. And the first one, I had one in mind already, but I saved that one for the end. I didn't think it was going to be sniped. One thing that my team is still very much missing is a Fairy type. I have Steel, I have Dragon, I don't have Fairy. I also, by the way, have Fire and Water, but not Grass. And I should probably have mentioned, before I drafted Venomoth, I looked at what was available in the C tier to round out those cores, but I was really underwhelmed. I could have taken Cacturne for a Fire, Water, Grass core. I wasn't really sure what Cacturne was going to do for this team. Tropius was available, and Tropius is not a bad Pokemon, but when I already had Noivern drafted mostly for Tailwind, it was a little harder to justify Tropius to myself. Meanwhile, for Fairy types, I think it was just Carbink in C tier at that point. And again, I just don't really see a place for Carbink on this team. But I still thought that I should have a Fairy type, because there was something that I was concerned about. It might have been opposing Dark types. I don't really have that much for them. I mean, I have Urshifu, but Uxie has to worry about Dark types. Zoroark has to worry about Dark types. Nobody's especially strong into them except Urshifu. So I felt like a Fairy type was valuable to round this team out. But I wasn't sure I was going to find anything good in untiered. The thing about untiered is the Pokemon are not good Pokemon, right? And so if you try to draft them to be good Pokemon, they're still probably going to be outclassed. My first season in this league, I took Voltorb because I thought it was just objectively one of the best Pokemon in untiered. It has base 100 speed, it has a lot of interesting support options, but there was never a matchup in the entire season where Voltorb felt like the best option to bring, even though it had those tools. In the end, you can only bring 6 of your 11 Pokemon, and it can be extremely hard to justify one of them being anything from untiered, unless you're the guy who got Berserker, right? So I think the better way to approach untiered is to have a specific role in mind that Pokemon can reasonably fill, even though it's a bad Pokemon overall. Last season I had Slowpoke, and I used it like 3 times just for Trick Room and Prison. So, drafting a Fairy type for the sake of being a Fairy type, I think is potentially a recipe for disaster, because it's possible that I'm not going to get anything good, right? I looked at Meryl, but what am I going to do with Meryl on this team? I kind of wanted Jigglypuff, because I thought I could maybe do Perish Song stuff with the bulky guys, but Jigglypuff was already taken by the time I got to this pick. Meryl can also do Perish Song stuff, but I didn't really see the vision. Perish Song I think would be hard to maneuver with this team. I don't have any trapping or anything, and Meryl, I was just not sold on Meryl overall. But I did still get a Fairy type anyway, and that was Floette. I'm basically counting on Floette just not being that bad. Like, it's not good, but I mean, it can run an Eviolite. It has a usable special attack stat, I'm pretty sure. It gets Moonblast. It gets some support tools. And I feel like Floette is not nearly a Pokemon I bring every week. But if I have a matchup that's just crying out for a fairy type, I can probably justify slotting it in somewhere. And, you know, having a fairy type that's usable at all, hopefully, means that opponents will have to respect that when they're building for me. I heads up, if you're an opponent of mine watching this, I like to bring every Pokemon that I have at some point every season. So you're going to see Floette. It's not just going to be sitting on the bench. You should respect it in the builder. The last thing about Floette is, coincidentally, it just happened to fit extremely well, better than almost any Pokemon in the game, with the nickname theme that I had already decided on by this point. So assuming I record my games, you'll see the nicknames and you'll see what I mean. Floette, perfectly on brand for this edition of the Halifax Masquerainmen. And I don't really need to filibuster anymore. I took Psyduck in the last round as an untiered free agent. Psyduck caught my attention for exactly one thing, and that was Cloud9. People have weather teams in this league. I don't have a weather team. Again, Quillfish is kind of a fun anti-weather mon sometimes, and I have a couple other tricks up my sleeve that I won't divulge right now because I'm actually facing a Sun team in week 1. But yeah, having Psyduck available to shut off the weather. I mean, again, Psyduck's a bad Pokemon. I don't know if it's ever going to be the best option to bring in any week. Maybe I just like switch it in to turn off an opponent's Swift Swim and sacrifice it while I outspeed their thing. I don't know. I wanted to do like Aqua Jet into Weakness Policy Flareon stuff maybe, but fun fact, Golduck gets Aqua Jet, Psyduck doesn't. Psyduck does have some support options. It has like Icy Wind and stuff. But I really just drafted it for Cloud9, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if this guy gets swapped out for something else. Not even that far into the season. We'll see. But here's the breakdown with the roster rules. Right? Every slot filled, and I went through the order in which I actually drafted them. And here's the team. Hisuian Zoroark, or Single Striker Shifu, Noivern, Quillfish, Uxie, Orthworm, Blissey, Flareon, Venomoth, Floette, and Psyduck. I feel like I might have gone a little too weird with this one. I wanted a team that could do a variety of different things, and I wanted a team that was going to force me to think every week and build more creatively for my matchups than I did last season. I think this team will certainly do that. I don't know that this team turned out as strong as I wanted. It honestly doesn't do all of the things that I thought I wanted my team to do. And I know some people in the league have been making their tier lists of the best and worst teams in the league, and mine has ranged in other people's placements from bottom tier to like right in the middle. They might be right objectively, but in the end it comes down to how you use the team, and this is more or less the kind of team I wanted to use. It took some turns that I didn't expect, but I think I'm going to have a fun season, whatever happens. And at least I'm not bashing my head into a fast Sun offense wall every single week this time. So I think these guys are going to be fun. I'm looking forward to my games. I'm recording this Saturday night of week 1, and I actually think I'm going to play my first match tomorrow. I have already built for it, but no leaks, obviously. And maybe I'll keep this YouTube thing going, and we'll see together how the season plays out for me. But that's all for now. Here's the team. PDL Season 4, Halifax Masquerainmen. Let's go.